Many poets claim that nature feels incomplete without a woman. From this belief, no doubt, arise all those florid comparisons that in their verses liken our natural companion now to a rose, now to a violet, now to a tulip, and so on. That yearning for tenderness which seizes us at twilight, when evening mists rise over the hills and the earth's scents intoxicate us, cannot be poured out entirely in lyrical invocations. That is why Mr. Patissot, like so many others, was consumed by a mad thirst for love. 4 sweet kisses in secluded alleys where stray sunbeams slipped through, for handclasps, for a supple waist bending within his arms. Love seemed to him an endless delight, and in his hours of reverie he gave thanks to the great unknown for having placed so much charm in human caresses. Yet he needed a companion and did not know where to find her. On a friend's advice, he went to the Folies-Bergère. There he discovered an entire assortment, but fell into confusion when it came time to choose, for the longings of his heart were mostly made up of poetic impulses, while these ladies, with their painted eyes and alluring smiles revealing rows of false teeth, seemed hardly versed in poetry. At last he fixed his choice upon a young debutante, poor, timid in appearance, with a sad gaze that seemed to foretell a nature responsive to poetic feeling. He arranged a meeting with her for the next morning at 9 o'clock, at the Saint Lazare station. She did not appear, but showed such delicacy as to send a friend in her place. The substitute was a tall red-haired girl, patriotically dressed in a tricolored gown and wearing an enormous bonnet hat, out of the middle of which her head protruded. Mr. Patissot was somewhat disappointed but reconciled himself to the exchange. Together they set off for Maisons Laffitte, where sailing regattas and a great Venetian fete had been announced. No sooner had they entered the railway carriage, where 2 gentlemen with decorations and 3 ladies, marquises at the very least, judging by their proud bearing, were already seated, than the redhead, whose name was Octavia, declared in a voice as shrill as a parrot's that she was a simple girl, fond of laughter and devoted to the countryside, since one could pluck flowers there and eat fried fish. She laughed so shrilly that the glass windows rattled, and she familiarly called her escort Fatty. Patissot, bound by the restraint proper to a government clerk, felt exceedingly embarrassed. Octavia soon fell silent, however, casting sidelong glances at the other ladies and burning with that desire peculiar to such creatures, to strike up acquaintance with respectable women. After 5 minutes she thought she had found her pretext. She pulled from her pocket a copy of Gil Blas and offered it politely to one of the ladies, who, with a look of astonishment, refused. Offended, the redhead began to utter innuendo, hinting at women who put on airs but were no better than the rest. From time to time she let fly a coarse remark that burst like a firecracker amid the glacial silence of the passengers. At last they arrived. Patissot hastened into the shaded depths of the park, hoping his companion's irritation might subside in the woodland calm. Not so. No sooner had she caught sight of greenery than she burst into full-throated song, belting out scraps of operas lodged in her bird-like brain. She trilled roulades, leaping from Robert the Devil to La Muette, and, smitten with some sentimental ditty, she repeated its closing lines in a languid yet piercing voice, sharp as a drill. Suddenly she grew hungry and declared she wished to return. Patissot, still hoping for tenderness, vainly tried to detain her. At last she flared up. "I didn't come here to die of boredom." So they went to the Petit Havre, a restaurant near the regatta grounds. She ordered breakfast fit for an army, but, unwilling to wait, demanded an appetizer. A box of sardines was brought. She attacked it as if ready to swallow the tin along with the fish, but after 2 or 3 declared herself full and announced her intention of watching the preparations for the races. Patissot, distraught and hungry himself, flatly refused to stir. She went off alone, promising to return for dessert. Left in solitude, he began his meal, wondering how he might bend this obstinate nature to fulfill his dream. When she failed to return, he went to look for her. He found her among a troop of oarsmen, sunburnt, half-naked, and gesticulating loudly. Hanging on the arm of a hulking fellow with biceps far superior to his brains, she whispered something to him. The man replied, "All right." And she came back to Patissot, cheerful, eyes sparkling, almost affectionate. "I want to go boating," she said. Delighted by this show of amiability, he agreed. They rowed off. Passing beneath an old mill, whose rotting sails drooped over the water, they found themselves in a charming bend of the river, shaded by giant trees. The stream wound right and left, unveiling distant meadows on one side and a hillside dotted with villas on the other. They glided past hidden bathing houses and an idyllic hamlet where gentlemen in fresh gloves and ladies in full dress strolled, an elegance oddly out of keeping with the simplicity of nature. Octavia cried with delight, "We'll come here to bathe too." A little further on she insisted on stopping in a tiny cove. "Come here, fatty, sit closer." She put her arms round his neck, laid her head on his shoulder, and murmured, "How lovely! How sweet it is on the water." Patissot was in rapture. He thought of those foolish oarsmen who, blind to the grace of the banks and the delicate charm of the reeds, rowed themselves into stupor, sweating and puffing, racing only from the tavern where they breakfasted to the tavern where they would dine. His bliss was such that he dozed off. But when he awoke, he was alone. He called out, no answer. Alarmed, fearing some mishap, he stepped ashore. And then he saw, far off, a long, slender skiff skimming the water, driven like an arrow by 4 rowers blackened by the sun. At the helm sat a woman. My God! Could it be? Yes, it was she, Octavia. Keeping time with the oars, she sang the boatman's song in her piercing voice. As they swept past, she broke off her singing, blew him a kiss, and shouted, "Ah, you simpleton!